Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Georgie Fleming, and I'm one of the Education and Media Technicians here at Caseware UK. Today, I'm joined by Les Horsley, one of the Education and Media Consultants, and today's webinar is Accounts Advanced, Academy and Charity, Editing the Trustees Report and Legal and Admin Document. Les is going to be taking you through the presentation today, while I'll be working behind the scenes and answering the questions you raise during the session. Before I hand over to Les, there are some housekeeping items we will run through. I have mentioned questions. Please do type them into the questions field on the control panel of the GoToWebinar rather than using the hand raising feature. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, and we will try and incorporate as many of your questions into that session as we can. We are recording this webinar today, and we will publish the recording on the knowledge base, and depending on how many questions we receive, we may also publish a Q&A document. Before I hand over to Les today, we do have a poll that we'd like you to participate in, which I will launch shortly. But I just also wanted to make you aware that we do have a handout available to you on the GoToWebinar panel today titled Relevant Links. So in that document, there are some knowledge base articles on editing and various other things relating to the Trustees report. We've also added links to our Charity and Academy Getting Started guides as well as recent webinars we have run on the Charity and Academy template, just so that you have all the information to hand, so hopefully you'll find that helpful. So what I will do now is I'm just going to launch the poll. And the poll we've got for you is, are you new to the Accounts Advanced Charity and Academy template, or are you using the template and are just attending today's webinar for a refresher? So I'll just give you a few moments. The poll is anonymous. Don't feel pressured at all. It is just so we can gauge our audience. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to close that poll off. And I'm just going to share the results on screen. So we've got 56% of you are new to the template, and then we've got the 44% that need a refresher. Perfect, thank you very much. What I'll do is I'm going to hide that. There will be a poll during the webinar as well, but for the time being, I'm going to hand you over to Les.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you ever so much to Georgie for that introduction. And if you hadn't sort of seen any of my webinars before, my name is Les Horsley. I'm one of the Education and Media Consultants here at Caseware. So thank you very much for completing the poll. I guess before I actually make a proper start, as Georgie says, we will actually find it useful just to sort of find out about the level of experience of people who use the Academy and Charity template within sort of Caseware, and just sort of like to find out their level of experience. So we've got just under half an hour, I guess, now to actually go through our webinar. And so I'm just going to quickly run through the agenda just to highlight the points we're actually going to go through. So there's two areas to look at. We're going to look at the Trustees report and the Legal and Admin document. If I just highlight what we're actually going to go through on the Trustees report, a number of different areas. So we're going to look at some of the options in terms of customization, so how you can actually create your own required disclosures within the actual Trustees report. So effectively looking at adding in sort of like the appropriate text, as well as ensuring you actually have the correct sections included within the Trustees report. Some of you, particularly if your organisations perhaps are sort of maybe larger, might actually want to have some additional information, so things like pictures and graphs and sort of and tables and other sorts of information. And so we look at how we can actually insert objects into your Trustees report. And then again, as well as that, some of you might actually have maybe trustees who want to provide their own disclosures and their own information. So we actually look at what's called the freeform report. So if you want to, you can actually include your own version of the trustees report rather than using the standard Caseware templates. The template we're looking at obviously is for both academies and charities. So I'm actually going to focus initially on the charity template using the charity set of accounts, but perhaps we'll also have a quick look at the academy. So there's just a small difference here, or small extra item I just want to highlight in the academy's financial statements that applies to the trustees report. But once we've looked at the trustees report, we'll move on to actually look at what's called the legal and admin document. And I think Georgie mentioned about half of you are actually completely new to the template. If you're not aware, the legal and admin document forms what is called the reference administration section of your financial statement. So effectively is a sub-document, is a document in its own right, but that sub-document gets incorporated into accounts and forms a reference and administration section within your accounts, and effectively that reference and administration section, if you haven't seen a Caseware set of accounts, is the information page right at the start of the financial statements in your charity and academy template. So we're going to move on and look at that second. And in terms of that legal and admin document, we're going to look at how we can actually ensure the correct information with regard to trustees is included in that legal and admin document. We'll look at some of the other information that can get included in that legal and admin document. So as well as trustees, there's other sort of other bits of information included there. We'll look at how you can actually change the layout. So there's a few options in terms of formatting of that document. But once again, once we looked at those areas, I'm going to focus on the charity template initially. But there are one or two differences in terms of the template as it applies to academies. And so we'll quickly, at the end of our webinar, just actually have a look at an academy file and just show you one or two things that are perhaps subtly different there that you need to be aware of if you do prepare a set of accounts for an academy. So that's going to be our agenda for the next just under half an hour or so. And as I said, we're just going to start off by actually going to a trustees report. And I'm just going to sort of show a charity file to start with. And then, as I said, we'll look at an academy very, very briefly. So just bear with me whilst I'll just change over. I'll just come out of PowerPoint and then I'll just show you the relevant charity file that we actually want to focus on. So you should see in front of you a charity file, completely fictitious as these files are, but it just gives you a general flavour. But in this charity file, I've actually gone to the trustees report, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview, really. So we've got a trustees report. We've got December 2018 year end, and as you can see within the trustees report, the Caseware template, the Caseware format that's provided for you has a number of different sections. So at the start, we actually start off with that user text box, that green text box at the start, which just gives you a little bit of a preamble. And then underneath that, we actually have a number of different sections. So underneath that section, the preamble, we've got a section on objectives and activities. And within general section on objectives and activities, as you can sort of see, you actually have a number of different subheadings. So we can talk about policies and objectives, and also things like strategies for achieving objectives and so on. And as you might imagine, where we have those green text boxes where it says user input, I think even those people who perhaps are relatively new to this Caseware file will be aware that you can just remove those text. That text, the standard text here, and just provide the appropriate text there. So nothing too difficult there. And again, I suspect people actually are new to the charity template, excuse me, would also be aware, as well as just typing information in, we can just copy and paste it in as we think appropriate. So I'm in my first section, the first main section there, as I said, talking about objectives and activities, and we have a fairly standard layout. So there's actually a number of areas which are expected to actually cover, so things like strategies and so on. But as always, every organisation is different, and as you can see, if I scroll down towards the bottom of that section, I have a number of different spare paragraphs, and if I just want to include some additional information, obviously I can just tick that box there to actually include the appropriate spare paragraph. So if I tick that sort of the first spare paragraph box, you can see automatically, as we're in the section on objectives, that paragraph is actually now printed out. So previously it was actually in blue skip text and wasn't printing, but now it's actually in normal font and will actually print out. And as it's effectively a subsection, you can see automatically that subsection letter in this case is actually showing. So we actually have a number of different sections there. We can just provide the appropriate information. If I scroll down, as well as those main sections towards the bottom of the trustees report, we do actually have a number of completely blank sections. So we actually have sort of sections on, say, employee involvement and plans for the future. Those are, I guess, standalone sections without their own particular subsections. And so if you've got additional information that you want to include, which doesn't fall in the previous categories, I can just, again, use these spared paragraphs here just to provide that appropriate information. So I'm just going to tick on that spare paragraph 1. Main reason I'm doing that, you might actually think it's actually just similar to what I've actually showed you just now, but the main point is, I think, in this part, as it's not a subsection of the of another report. So in the first example where I tick that box to actually include that additional paragraph is a subsection of the objectives. Here, I suppose, effectively is its own spare paragraph, so it's actually a standalone paragraph. So that's the, I guess, the general format of the trustees report and the general layout. And as I said, where we actually have those individual sections, we can just provide the appropriate information within those green text boxes. Now, as you might have spotted, as you scroll up and down, there's very often, as well as those tick boxes, there's actually quite a few sort of help options available to you. So I'm just going to scroll right up to the top of my trustees report, and you can see, as an example, we actually have this help button here where it talks about scene setter. If I just tick that help button, we get a help dialogue appearing. And in terms of the scene setter here, as always, these help dialogues either give you either further help and or further guidance. In this case, in terms of scene setter, if I just tick the appropriate box and close this window down, we now actually have an additional green paragraph, so we can just provide, I guess, a sort of bit of a background narrative, so just setting the scene for the charity. And also there is actually a range of help windows which actually just provide further guidance in terms of the actual relevant charity SORP FRS 102. So again, if I just tick the appropriate box where it says objectives and activities, all charities under the charity SORP, as you might expect, you just get some guidance, some extracts basically from that charity SORP, which just explains the reason why you actually need to complete that section and what information you need to provide within it. So each of those sections will actually have either further help and further guidance, or, as you can see, extracts from the relevant SORP to actually make sure you provide the appropriate disclosures within this trustees report. Perhaps just give a special mention, I guess, right at the top of the sort of trustees report, that very first help button there. If I just open up that one, that provides you perhaps more sort of general guidance. So the previous help buttons we've actually looked at are specific to the actual sections we've actually been in, but the initial question mark and the help window that appears if you open it up actually gives just general guidance in terms of the overall structure of the trustees report. So you can sort of see, as we've gone through and looked at the objectives section, we actually have a number of different subheaders or subsections, and those are I guess marked by different letters, but if you prefer, if you don't like those letters, I can just use the option here just to replace those letters, maybe just using bullet points as an example. And if I just select that option, again, just quickly close this window down where we actually had section A for policies and objectives, that just changes to actually be a bullet point. And similar sort of thing, just in terms of formatting, really, again, if I just quickly open that window up, the sections underneath it just allow you to actually adjust the various different paragraph spacings, as you can see. So we have a sort of choice in that drop-down menu, normal spacing, which I think is probably most of you will actually prefer, to be honest, but you can see in that drop-down menu, you can actually sort of just reduce that to actually have a smaller spacing, or perhaps even no spacing at all if you actually want the actual text narrative to be completely underneath that actual the actual header itself. So just, again, just some sort of formatting options for you to think about. So they're just a sort of general broad brush guidance, I guess, in terms of actually sort of providing the actual appropriate information, the appropriate disclosures in your set of financial statements. Now, I talked about how some of you might possibly want to actually have a more detailed sort of like arrangement in your set of accounts. So rather than actually just having sort of text notes, if you maybe have a larger charity and perhaps just want to provide some additional information, you might, for example, want to provide sort of, say, pictures to actually illustrate the work you've actually sort of done during the year, or perhaps graphs or tables to actually provide sort of some of the key sort of financial data. And you can actually insert objects into your trustees report if you actually want to do so. So perhaps just as an example, if I just scroll down, it's going to remain in the objectives section, but if I just scroll down towards the bottom, as we saw just now, I chose the option to actually introduce that sort of spare paragraph here. And in that spare paragraph, I might just want to provide some maybe some sort of like graphics, for example, and I can do so if I feel it's appropriate to do so. So I'm just going to remove that sort of use text here. And actually, let's go into a slightly different view. So we're actually in a view of our sort of set of accounts called full mode, which is a standard view where you actually do most of your editing. Again, some of you who aren't completely brand new to Caseware will actually be aware there's actually a slightly different mode called enable editing. So in that enable editing mode, in terms of editing your trustees report, it does give you a few more options. To go into that enable editing option, again, I suspect probably for those of you who are relatively new, if I just go to the toolbar at the top and click on the view button, in that view button in the toolbar at the top, I can select enable editing on the left hand side. That enable editing option does actually require a password, and if you're not aware of your password, please sort of speak to your sort of main user, your sort of super users in your organization. But if I just type in the password, hopefully I get it right, as sometimes I do actually misspell it. I've actually got this enable editing mode where it just gives me a few additional options. And as I said, I'm in spare paragraph number 1. And maybe just to illustrate the work, I might just want to sort of provide some sort of graphics. So what I can do in this enable editing mode, if I go to the toolbar at the top, I do have slightly few more options. And if I go to the insert option there, I can just click on the picture button. And if I just click on that picture button, I can just browse and find the relevant picture. So in my case, I've actually got a JPEG file saved on my desktop. I can just click on open. And I can just choose that picture, and I can just choose to actually embed that picture in the document. If I do choose to embed that picture directly, you can see I actually have the option to actually resize picture. I guess if you are resizing picture, you might want to keep the appropriate aspect ratio, but once I've done that, I can just make the picture either sort of smaller or bigger if I want to do so. But once I've done that, if I just click on OK, you can sort of see that that picture is actually now inserted in my sort of document, and obviously it's there for people to actually have a look at. So that is actually one option. I'm actually just going to choose the option to actually sort of show spare paragraph number 2, just to show you sort of something slightly different. So rather than actually sort of like disclosing that picture and embedding it directly as an object, if I again just remove that standard text there where it says enter text, if I just remove that, rather than actually insert the picture on its own, the other option I've got is actually insert that picture as maybe an item in a Word document. So if I just go back to my insert menu, in that insert menu, in this enable editing mode, you can sort of see I can just choose to actually insert an object, and that object basically is going to be a document, a Word document. So I'll just choose the option to actually create from a file, and just click on the browse button and go to my desktop. I've actually got an example image here, which I'm just going to click on to actually insert. And then once I've done that, if I just click on OK, that Word document is actually inserted as an object. So if I perhaps just come out of enable editing mode, so I'll just click on the view button in the toolbar at the top and deselect this enable editing option and come out of this the enable editing mode, go back into normal form mode. You can see I've actually inserted that picture, but as I've inserted that picture as part of a Word document, I've also got some additional narrative here. So you can sort of see I've actually just got some narrative at the bottom, just talking about the regeneration of that particular high street as an example. So that's some of the options there in terms of editing objects in your set of accounts. So just quickly before we move on, one other thing I actually want to cover in terms of the actual standards or trustees report is the option to actually sort your audit of your financial statements. And if you just go to the presentation option, in that presentation option, we have the sorting button. And in that sorting button, as you might imagine, if I just click on the drop-down menu, obviously we can actually just change the general order of the financial statements. So you might just want to move the trustees report, for example, I don't know, probably before the the information page or something along those lines. But in the sort option in this template, we actually also have the option to actually sort the trustees report sections. So if I just select that, we do actually get taken quickly back to the actual sort of accounts preparation table. And in the accounts preparation table, if I want to, for example, just choose the option to actually move the sort of sections down. So if I just bring the sort of windows actually opened up from my other screen, I can sort maybe sort of say objectives section, move it, perhaps move it up or move it down in this window if I don't want that objectives section to be the first part of my trustees report. So that's how I can actually just sort the overall order of the trustees report, and also obviously I can also select the actual position of the trustees report in the financial statements itself. I'm just going to cancel that. I'm not actually going to change anything, so I'm just going to close that window down and go back to my financial statements ever so quickly. But also in terms of sorting, when the accounts are actually just reopened, I'll just quickly point out, as well as sorting the actual general order within specific sections. So if I just go to my trustees report and my objectives sort of section, you can see in that drop down menu, I can actually sort the specific paragraphs within that section itself. So the objectives section starts off with policies and objectives. Again, in much the same way as I sorted the actual general sections of the trustees report, can actually amend the subsections within that general objective section. So again, much like the previous window we actually looked at, I can just use this window to actually select which area I actually want to move up or move down. But once I've done that, I can just click on OK and just go back to my sort of general sort of trustees report when I've actually just got the correct disclosures. So there's a few options there just in terms of editing the actual sort of standard sort of Caseware trustees report, both in terms of inserting and also inserting objects. And perhaps just quickly mention, I talked in terms of inserting objects, I'll talk about how you can actually insert pictures or perhaps insert objects which actually contain those pictures. You can actually also obviously insert maybe sort of say a graph or a table if you actually have that as a Word document or an Excel document in your Caseware file. Just quickly point out, if I just quickly go back into enable editing, in that enable editing mode, if I just go to the insert menu, you also have the option to actually insert possibly sort of tables or pictures or graphs in that enable editing mode. But to be honest, that functionality, whilst it can be used, it's not actually sort of so clear cut as perhaps inserting that table or graph as a separate object. So I'll probably recommend just go through that routine, to be honest, rather than try and insert it using the functions available in that enable editing mode. But that just really is an overview of the actual standard Caseware trustees report and some of the editing options that are available for you when you actually look at it. Now, many of you will actually have perhaps if you work for a firm of accountants, will actually have a sort of separate trustees board, and that trustee, that your clients will actually have their own sort of trustees report, and you do actually have the option to actually insert that trustees report as effectively a free-form document. So I'm going to talk about that in a sort of second, but just at this moment, I'm just going to quickly hand you back over to Georgie, because again, we're going to have another poll just to find your experience of using that free-form report. So at this point, I'll just hand you back over to Georgie.
Perfect, thank you, Les. So I'm just going to launch the poll on your screens now. So have you been using the standard layout of the trustees report, or do you use a free form layout, or indeed you may use both? So I'll just give you a few moments. Perfect, so thank you for that. I'm just going to close it off, and the same again, I'm just going to share the results on screen. So we've got 86% of you use the standard, and you've got 14% that use both. Thank you for that, guys, really appreciate it. I'm just going to hide that and hand you back to Les.
Thank you very much, Georgie. Thank you for doing that poll, and obviously thank you everyone else for actually sort of providing the results. Again, we will find it useful just to sort of make sure that actually we are aware of what people use or how people use the sort of charity and academy template. So I said we'd just look at the freeform report. If you think the freeform report would be useful to you, it's basically available in the help menu right at the top of the trustees report side. I did open up this window right as more or less at the start of the presentation, the webinar. But if you do think it's going to be useful, you can just tick the box here to actually use a freeform report. And initially what you get, you don't actually get very much, to be honest. So I just close that window down. Effectively, you just get a single blank user text box, that green input box basically there. And as you might imagine, you as we saw earlier, if you're not familiar with these user text boxes, you can just put your cursor in that green text box and obviously either just type in the relevant information if it's given to you as a maybe sort of say an email, or if it's a Word document, you can obviously again just copy and paste from that Word document into that green user text box. Now, just now we actually talked about how we can actually insert objects into the green text boxes if you want to provide things like pictures or graphs or that sort of thing, or just some additional narrative if you don't really want to sort of type in the appropriate information. And much the same way as we looked at that in the actual individual sections in the actual Caseware standard template, if I do go back into enable editing mode, if I just go back to view and select enable editing, as we saw earlier, we can actually just insert objects. And if I just choose insert an object, we can actually insert a Word document which actually provides our sort of standards of trustees report, but as a sort of separate object effectively. So if I just choose the option to insert the object, go to my desktop, and in my desktop, I've got this draft trustees report, which once again I'm actually going to sort of select. And if I select the option to insert it and click OK, that trustees report will actually be inserted as a separate object. And obviously what I should have done is obviously just remove that default text before I do actually insert it. If you do that, just be aware that the actual sort of formatting there will actually sort of be consistent with the actual document itself. So if I just quickly open up that document I actually just saw, if you just bear with me. So just bear with me, I just got that, just going to open up that document. So I'm just going to move it across to the screen so you can actually sort of see it. Basically, what I did do is when I inserted it, I just made sure the actual sort of paragraph, the actual sort of spacing was actually correct. So if you just insert it as a standard Word document, you might sort of find that the actual sort of formatting doesn't quite fit in with the actual formatting of your sort of like your trustees report, the actual Caseware set of accounts. So in terms of actually inserting it, I did just make sure the actual paragraphs and the actual indents on the right hand side was consistent in this Word document with the actual sort of formatting of the actual Caseview set of accounts. So just pay a bit of attention to that, and also just make sure the actual sort of font itself is consistent with the actual sort of standard layout of the style within your Caseware set of accounts. So just make sure that if you do actually insert your trustees report as an object in your financial statements. But as you can see, once I've done that, I've actually got that sort of document actually inserted. If I just sort of scroll down, what I would say as well, the other thing to bear in mind is if you actually want to insert more than one page, if I go to insert, I probably just want to insert, I should have actually inserted some line breaks beforehand, but once I've actually inserted those line breaks beforehand, if I perhaps just remove this in enable editing mode, if you're going to insert more than one page, it's possibly just worth making sure that you've actually inserted some page breaks at the bottom. And then if you actually have a continuation page, so if I actually go to the back to enable editing and go to the insert objects functionality, which we just looked at, I could insert a continuation page. So I can choose the option here to actually create from file and click on browse, and I do actually have a continuation page there, which I would recommend if you actually have a larger trustees report, you actually insert that as separate objects. And the reason why I say that is because sometimes you will actually find that each object to insert is actually its own separate page in your trustees report, and it just makes sure that Caseware finds it easier to actually get the page numbering correctly. So sometimes you actually insert one large object spreading over multiple pages, you will find that the page numbering doesn't always feed through as it should do. But if you actually have separate pages in your trustees report inserted as several objects, those objects will actually be on the appropriate pages and the page numbering will actually be consistent. So there's a few options there in terms of our sort of trustees report and actual sort of standards Caseware trustees report. So I'm just going to cancel that. I did say I'd quickly look at the Academies functionality. Not actually much different there, but if I just quickly go to the Academies file, one thing I was actually going to mention is in terms of Academies, you are required to actually just provide some additional disclosures and trade union facility time, and that functionality is there for you to actually look at. So that's the trustees report. The other thing I'm actually going to mention is the actual legal and admin document. So legal and admin document, if I actually go back to my charity set of accounts, it basically is the actual information page right at the actual sort of start of the document. So this reference administration details is the legal and admin document. If I go to my wizard, in that wizard, I can go to the general information part of the wizard, and there I can actually go to the trustees report section, and in that I can actually go and open up the legal and admin document from this open button here. So if I click on that open button, basically we just get this legal and admin document open up. In there, I've actually provided, or we already have the names of our sort of 2 trustees. If I want to add more, so if there's actually been any appointments in the year, all I need to do is tick an option here to actually sort of show skip rows, and I can just provide my sort of second and my new trustee if I just call that person N trustee. And once I've done that, I can just choose an appropriate title. So in that drop down menu, I can just choose the appropriate title from a range of options that are available there, for example, trustee, or if it's something specific to this organisation, I can actually just choose my own sort of name if I want to do so. But in my case, I'm just going to sort of choose trustee. Obviously, I can just put in the date of appointment in this drop down menu, so the fact is actually pointing in the dates. But the other thing I actually can do is if you actually have committees within your organisation that run different parts of the charity or perhaps academy, you can actually also, with this new trustee, identify the actual membership of that committee. So if I just click on the arrow on the left-hand side, I can sort of perhaps identify that in this charity I might actually have, for example, say an audit committee or a finance committee. Perhaps a sort of like a general purposes committee. And it might be that our new trustee actually sort of served on both those committees. So I'll just tick the appropriate box here. And then once I've done that, if I just click on the option to actually close key, that membership of those committees will actually sort of feed through to the information page. So this is actually how we can actually just amend the trustees list. But in order to actually see the main document itself, I can just go to the drop down menu there. And rather than actually have the trustees list, I'm just going to go to the legal and admin report. And this legal and admin report feeds through and actually becomes that reference and administration section. So you can see the trustees are actually listed there, the 2 trustees that are there to start with, and the new trustee are actually just appointed, just actually shown as an appointment. They're there, as well as membership of their committees, as well as you can sort of see the other details that have actually fed through from Wizard. So things like registered office, names like auditors, bankers, and so on, and solicitors, they've actually sort of fed through from the Wizard into the legal and admin document. And also, right at the bottom, we actually have the name of our trustee. So that trustee is not a normal part of the wizard. So in order to actually put the names of additional advisors in, you can see if I go back to the wizard and the trustees report section in the wizard, right at the bottom, I can just add additional advisors in. So in this case, the name of our actuary, or perhaps any other advisors, can be inserted there. And as you see, once we've done that, I can just feed that through to the reference and administration section within the wizard. There's a few options there. So that's the actual information. Most of it's actually fed through, the trustees are actually fed through from this document. Most other information is actually fed through from the wizard. As I said, there are some sort of like quick options, quick and easy changes in terms of layout. So if I go onto that layout option in the blue toolbar on top, I can cycle between different layouts. At the moment, we've actually got layout number 2, but if I sort of choose that, layout number 1 just amends the indent, and there's actually 3 layouts that are applicable for you. So that's the reference and administration details. Just very, very quickly, because I think we are sort of more or less out of time. If I just quickly go to an academy file, in terms of the academy file, if I just go to the legal and admin document, just to point out that in the first section, as well as actually providing the names of our trustees, we can also provide the names of our members if we actually want to do so. If I just complete this section, and if I scroll down in this section, I can also identify the membership of the senior management team. So a little bit of a quick overview there about the legal and admin document, but I said that is actually quite key in terms of actually feeding the information page in your set of accounts. But that's it really. I've gone through quite a few areas, but we actually have run out of time, so I haven't really got time to actually go into any other areas, but I hope you actually found it useful. At this point, I'll just hand you back over to Georgie, and I hope and look forward to actually seeing you again in the very near future.
Perfect, thank you, Les. We do have one question that comes through. So the question is, when you insert a Word document, does it keep all of the original formatting and layout? For example, I have a client that uses a 2-column layout.
It's, oh, sorry, I just Yeah, so just adjusting the PowerPoint displays there. Good question. It's probably just worth making sure when you actually insert that trustees report, the actual document itself is actually sort of like the appropriate format. So just spend a bit of time actually inserting, making sure the formatting of the trustees report is actually correct before you actually insert it as an object in your set of financial statements.
Perfect, thank you. So looking ahead at upcoming webinars, you can see the agendas for all of our webinars and register for them over on the events page of our website. So that concludes today's webinar. If you do have any further questions at all, then just pop them into the feedback form at the end and we will get back to you. If you can take the time to fill that out, that would be really appreciated. And if you have any ideas for future content at all, or any webinar topics that you'd like us to cover, then feel free to add those in as well. So thank you very much for your time today. We do hope you enjoyed the webinar and enjoy the rest of your day.